Well, welcome back to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I am, of course, your host, Jacob Gooden. And today I've got a very special guest for you guys. Mrs. Ruth Brooks is here with us. You may remember her son, Derry. He was one of my first interviews, but I have known Mrs. Brooks for a very long time. She makes some of the world's greatest chocolate chip cookies. And I'm so thankful for her to be here today. Mrs. Brooks, welcome to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here. And you can call me Ruth.
Okay, Ruth. There's this weird transition period, I feel like, where it's like as kids, it's always Mr. and Mrs. And then there hits this point and it's like, I don't quite know what it is. And yeah, so Ruth, it's good to have you.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. I learned recently, well, I learned when Derry was on the show that you were also a homeschool kid. And so I know that kind of potentially shaped you homeschooling your own kids and stuff. But can you tell us a little bit about like your homeschool experience and growing up and like what home life was like and that kind of a thing?
Yeah, for sure. So I was in public school until through fourth grade. And then my older sister was going into junior high at that point. She had just finished sixth grade. And in San Diego, we lived in San Diego. Junior high was seventh and eighth grade. And the school that she would have gone to had a known drug problem. And my parents were like, they've been thinking about homeschooling. And so they decided this is a good time. We'll pull them out. Nobody did it back then. So the early days, it was just weird
Mhm.
because we didn't walk to school with our friends anymore. And
Right.
we had to hide from the truant officer. And it was just weird. And kind of people in the neighborhood, our friends were like, oh, there's that family that does weird stuff. But, it wasn't, I loved being around my mom and I had little siblings. I had at that point, I think three younger siblings. Maybe my mom might have been pregnant with the fourth. Um, and so it was, we got used to it and, it just became what we knew.
Yeah.
And we did our stuff on our own. My parents used a super like structured program at first where we sat at desks, we wore a uniform, they were, it was just, we modeled our school after a private Christian school and used
Right.
that curriculum, blah, blah, blah. So that was in the late 70s.
Okay.
And I was fifth grade. So between fifth and the end of high school, I was homeschooled.
It's interesting because most of the people who I talk to who they go from having gone to a public or private school to homeschooling, those first couple of years tend to be that much more like structured. We try to mimic school as much as possible. You had to wear a uniform. I didn't have to wear a uniform, but I do remember my mom being like, "Okay, like we're gonna get up at this time and we're gonna like this is the day." It's chunked out, very much like traditional school was. And then it just all kind of went to hell after a little bit because she
Right.
realized this is not working. But how many siblings do you have again?
I have eight. I grew
8.
up with seven. I grew
Okay.
up with seven siblings eventually.
Mhm.
But the last one wasn't born till I was 16. So
Okay.
I had,
Right. So yeah,
various number of siblings.
yeah, that's also kind of it- families with a lot of kids tend to also be like the homeschool families, for
Right.
sure. I feel like that's the norm. So so as time went on, as you got like later into high school years, did you guys also do like as an older sibling, were you also responsible for kind of helping educate and like raise the younger siblings, or did your mom really hold a lot of that?
I would say more in like childcare, not
Mhm.
necessarily educating them.
Okay.
Yeah, we got into a really strict um, parachurch organization when I was in my teens, and then so we went from being kind of more um, happier homeschooling to very strict and structured and a lot of anxiety because they required all this stuff.
Mhm.
And so I think my mom, uh, she did not love that. It was the Bill Gothard Advanced
Yeah.
Training Institute of America, so the shiny happy people.
Right. Okay.
And so I would say that made it a little harder. I mean, a lot harder for
Yeah.
her. And so I wouldn't say I was educating the younger siblings, but I had a lot of responsibility for the
Right.
household stuff like cooking and childcare and stuff like that, which I loved my younger
Yeah.
siblings. I didn't mind carting them around to different classes or whatever. It was part of being in a big family.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's, I mean, I come from a family of four, this
Mhm.
mom, dad, my sister and I, but it was always interesting to watch the homeschool families who were bigger because yeah, they had much more of this like everybody has a role to play, right? And it it can look really strange from the outside, but when you're in it and like going over like I used to babysit for the Hester family and like being there and experiencing it, you're like, oh, okay, I see it. Like it's just everybody has their job that they have to do, and that's just how everything works out at the end.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we have to get everything done, and there's a billion and one of us, so like everybody's got their role to play, and I think that it's kind of fun. I don't know. I don't regret not having more siblings, but I think it would have been an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah. Well, just different. It would have just been
Yeah,
different. So
yeah,
you're I feel like maybe you're more of an individual when you have fewer siblings and you're one of a pod. You have to play a part or you got to carry your weight or something isn't going to go right,
yeah,
So it's just a different experience
yeah.
completely.
So when it came to, let's flash forward just a little bit. So
Yep.
like you graduate, you move on, you get married, you have kids now, and it's time to decide what they're gonna do for school. Like, were you pretty set on like I'm gonna be a homeschool parent as well because I enjoyed my time in it, or were you thinking public private school? Like, what kind of led to you deciding?
Well, I think there was a lot of it was very fear-based, the decision. So, and back when my parents started homeschooling, it was very like it was protecting from something really bad, drugs or whatever it might be. So it was so then my experience and then introduced were many, many more fears um through that ATIA program. And
Right.
so like we had to like I didn't feel like I had a choice. I had to homeschool.
Okay.
I had to protect them from all the evils of the world. And so but I also loved being with them and I couldn't imagine I didn't want them to leave at 5 years old to go into school.
Mhm.
Um but it was definitely a fear-based decision for sure.
Now, the difference you brought up, like when you were a kid and going into homeschooling, you were like, we also had to hide from like the truant officer. But like
Right.
by the time, I mean, Derry and I are the same age, so I mean, we're talking 2000s is,
Right.
starting the homeschool. Homeschooling was a little bit more, I feel like, accepted at that point.
For
And
sure.
so maybe not having to run from the law as much. I know there was other fears, like you said, a lot of people had, but um, so I guess I guess my question there is like not so much what the fear was associated with it, but like, do you feel like, hmm, how do I want to phrase this? Do you feel like it was almost easier to homeschool your kids than what you had seen like your mom potentially have gone through back in the 70s of like, okay, there's a lot more access to just things to be able to do this now?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you had you had more than two choices for curriculum,
Hmm.
you know? I mean, you had so many choices. And so, yeah, definitely easier. It was more accepted. People didn't think you were weird, especially in where we ended up in Ojai. It was super common. I mean, there was a huge Catholic homeschool group that we kind of just, you know, hung out with and we had the Christian group and the Catholic group and we all hung out, we all
Yeah.
did tennis together and whatever, and similar values and we didn't have quite as many kids, but very similar values in like kindness and truthfulness and all these like character qualities that we're trying to instill in our kids. So it was definitely an easier road.
How quickly did you get involved in some of the like homeschool groups? Because I know like I felt like it wasn't until I interviewed my mom that I realized like I thought we had like a couple years in there where it was just like we're on our own. Turns out no, she was like pretty plugged into like group solutions and achieve very early on.
Right.
Was it kind of the same with you? Maybe not those specific groups, but
Well, okay, so the group that was before Group Solutions was Konos.
okay.
And it was a curriculum that they used super hands-on. Their little byline was man says sit still, God says wiggle. And so
Yeah.
they were very much about kids getting to experience learning in all these different ways. And so we joined that when Derry was first grade, Callie was kindergarten.
Okay.
And so that was all like a bunch of people that were also ended up over in Group Solutions, were also in Konos. But you know, like the Franzes were in Konos, and the Goldens, and like there were just a bunch of people. Susie E's family, they were in there.
Hmm.
You know, so it was every Friday for like 4 hours or something. Super fun. It was really kicked back. Joni Livermore ran it, and it was just a great intro and had some really nice people in it. And I feel like it was much more laid back. Group Solutions, there was a lot, for me, a lot of anxiety in Group Solutions, like a lot of, you know, first time obedience and Mr. and Mrs. always. And I just felt like Konos was much more like my jam. It was mellow, kind of more hippie. You got the hippie vibe. So Group Solutions stressed me out big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say coming to your house as a kid, your house always felt like just the chill house. Like I don't know what it was. You walked through the front door and it was just like a breath of fresh air sometimes. Like I'm a firstborn kid. My mom is a firstborn kid. Like they are not a first. She's a twin, but she's the first of their generation. But we more high strung people, I guess. Much more of that structured Group Solutions is like right up our jam because it's just the structure, right? But yeah, coming to your house, it was like, oh, okay, like I could take my shoes off. Like you said,
Right.
we grew up Ojai was hippy dippy. Like it was just like much more breath of fresh air. And your kids exemplified that too. I mean, I can't name you the number of times Derry was like, dude, just chill. Like it's okay.
Coming from a firstborn.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how Derry is so chill, and he still is today. But no, it's interesting to see kind of the evolution of where like people ended up, and then I remember hearing a lot about Konos, but I was not a part of it. Um, but that I love what you said about like man says sit still, God says like wiggle, and like kind of that freedom, because I think a big part of homeschooling that is just a positive for a lot of us was the fact that like there's so much flexibility in what you can do and what's working and what's not, and like each child's individual education, it can be a pro and a con, right? For sure. But um I know like I did really well with my parents. I think did an okay job at realizing like, okay, his strengths are here, now let's
Right.
tailor his education to that.
Yeah.
Um and I feel like you guys did kind of a similar thing, at least leaning into your kids of like they're
Mhm.
into this, like let's
Yep.
give them the tools they need to like pursue those things.
Right.
Um, so okay, when it came to like curriculum, because and like things of that nature, your kids are vastly different. And
Yeah.
just like their personalities and their learning styles and everything. Like Derry had made this comment when he was on about like you guys doing like a science altogether, the four of you, but just people were at different age ranges. And that was
Right.
like slightly different than like my experience. But like, I don't know, can you talk a little bit about like how you chose some of the curriculum or how you structured certain things inside of like your
Sure.
homeschool of like, okay, we're kind of all doing this together, but we do have to create, I mean, there's an age gap here. There's a learning a difference here. Um, yeah, I don't know. Share a little bit about that.
It was mostly by necessity because I had two kids close together. My first two were 18 months apart. So it was easy with those two to kind of like you had to do math separately, but a lot of other things you could do together.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, around year 4 of homeschooling, I realized like something wasn't working with Derry, and he turned out he was dyslexic. And so that influenced quite a bit of how we did school. So a lot of things became auditory. I would read stuff out loud. I'd read the text out loud. We'd answer questions together. And so a lot of the choices, and coming from that kind of more hippie, like those books that were written like Better Late Than Early, that were written in the 70s. And there was one book, The Angel and the Marble, and it's a quote from is it Leon? Oh, well, anyway, one of the great masters, one of the great artists, and he said he would see a chunk of marble, and he would say, I saw the angel in the marble, and I freed it, basically. And
Hmm.
he would, you know, bring out this beautiful piece of art. And so that was kind of what I was going for, like, who are they? And then when you add a little learning difficulty like dyslexia, where you can't read your own text, well, then I had to be more involved. And I loved reading to my kids. And so,
Yeah.
but then some of the choices that I made were going to be based on, can we do this together? Can we do this hands on? And so it turned out that Callie also has dyslexia, but she was diagnosed more with dyscalculia, and it was like turning numbers around. And so math was difficult for her. So anyway, I ended up choosing, I mean, different things every year. I didn't use one thing consistently throughout. It was like, if I found something that worked better, I
Hmm.
would get that,
Okay.
And when Harry was in fourth grade and he started going to a tutor, Suzanne Jellison, amazing woman.
Yep.
Um, then, we started doing this curriculum that they use, this Barton system, which was super expensive, but it helped them learn all the rules of the English language, which truly texting did more. Eventually, texting where it underlines it in red, I think that did more for Derry to give him proficiency than any learning to read curriculum. And then my dad, who was an educator, he would say, don't worry about it. The Greeks and Romans never taught their boys until they went through puberty. Like, wait until he's 14 and the brain starts growing again. And so, I had these influences that were telling me just to relax.
Yeah.
And that, it helped, because I was freaking out. When my fourth grader couldn't read, I was freaking out. And we had, all these people, for as hippy dippy as Ojai is, the homeschool group was not like that. The homeschool group was very much like, teach them so they can get into a good university. So that's the homeschool influence I had around me, it was much more that way in Ojai than it was in Ventura.
No, that's interesting because I mean, I definitely, my parents from a very young age were kind of, they instilled in me this like, okay, like here's kind of what life is going to look like, right? You're going to be a
Mhm.
kid and you're going to be at home with mom and dad and we're going to do all these things and you're going to go to school and you're going to all these things. And then you're going to turn 18 and you're going to graduate from high school. And then you get to make a decision. You get to either go to college or university, or you're going to be a trade, or you're going to get a job, or, whatever. And then down the line, maybe you'll get married and maybe you'll have kids and maybe you'll do X, Y, Z. Right. And so they were kind of setting me up for that. But yes, I do remember some Ojai families also being very, you're this is the path and you follow the path and the path is good, and the path does not work for everybody.
Right.
I know when I had Derry on, he was just like we were talking about, he just graduated from college with a degree, and so very different paths, and that's okay. It's like we all have our own path to walk, right?
Yeah, and that's probably one of the hardest things, is letting your kid make their own decision when you feel like, well, this is the path you should be on, but not trying to overly emphasize that. I hear from my kids that I pressured them a lot to go to college and to get a degree. Like, I heard that after the fact. I didn't feel like I was doing that, but
Hmm.
but I wasn't it wasn't an option for me in my homeschool
Hmm.
journey, because with that group that we were with, you did not go to college, Christian
Right.
college or regular university. And so I was like, why would you not, if you have the opportunity, why would you not get a degree? I couldn't understand that. And so I mean, I did my best to not pressure them, but I have heard that I did pressure them. So
You
sorry,
know,
kids.
I think it's interesting now because we were talking about this a little bit when you and I chatted a few weeks ago, and even in my conversations with Derry, it's like it's so interesting now because Derry and I were a decade out of high school, um, and like to look back and go, okay, like my parents did this, and
Mhm.
maybe I view it now as negatively, but there's also this like level of like you also kind of have to be like my parent was also kind of just doing the best they possibly could, right, or what
Right,
they thought was right. And
right,
while you don't feel like you were pressuring your kids, okay, but now it's great that they can communicate that to you and say, okay, hey, this felt like this, right? And
right.
then hopefully as a parent you can also be receptive to the fact that it's like, okay, this was like this, and help encourage other parents or make changes in your own life, um, to kind of like alter that, right? And it to be different. I don't know. That's what I do with my parents as well. Like we have all these difficult conversations now about like, well, I don't like that we did this as kids. You know, I don't like that you pushed me to do this. It's like, but now
Right.
we can, I don't know, work on it together and still have a relationship, you know?
Well, one thing your mom said, which so resonated with me, is just that, she hadn't brought a super emotionally healthy version of herself to parenting because we come and that's the same with me. Like I did not have a lot of good tools. And so you're flying by the seat of your pants and you're doing some of in reaction to how you were raised. You're like, well, I'm not going to do that. And so you swing the other way.
Right.
And but then you bring all this unconscious stuff. Like you don't realize you're doing it, but you so want your kid to be okay that but yeah, you do your best with the tools you have.
And prepping for this and chatting with you, like, I haven't watched Shiny Happy People, but I did a lot of I was reading a lot of things about that particular institute, and I know my mom had some involvement in something similar to that, and things like that. And so, as a 28-year-old guy now, it's like I'm learning the things that my parents and my parents' friends and my friends' parents they went through these things, right, and they are unpacking. So yeah, there's generational trauma in there. There's all these different things. And I think now we're at a point, hopefully, in the world where we're at least starting to talk a lot more about these things and be open about them. And um, that's the difference I see with certain parents over other parents is the parents who are willing to be like, okay, I'm learning, I'm unpacking, I'm healing, right? They tend to have still very good or at least some relationship with their kid,
Mhm.
as opposed to the parents who are just stuck in the like, no, I did everything right and I followed the rule book and whatever. It's like their kids are leaving and they don't want anything to do with them anymore. um
Right.
and it's like, are you surprised, to be real? To be
Right.
honest. So anyway, so kudos to you and Keith, because I feel like you have a relationship with your kids. Three of them live at home with you still. I know that's not for long, but three of them are at home, and it sounds like you guys get along decently well still.
Well, I mean, we've definitely had our times.
Yeah,
We've definitely and where you just have to be like, I'm sorry, like I didn't realize and I honestly like it's really hard and I'm sure my kids could tell you that I get defensive and I'm like I didn't know that I was doing that. Like I'm sorry, before I'm like, okay, you guys, I'm sorry. I'm actually sorry. I
yeah,
definitely like it rises up in me like I was doing my best.
yeah.
But you just have to say sorry and go from there, like you said, try to talk about it.
Again, it's just I think it's being open, and then for kids too, like myself, it's like I held a lot of things maybe over my parents sometimes that I was like. Once I got to a point of realizing that I was like, well, my parents were doing the best they could and the best they knew
Mhm.
how to. And
Yep.
that's why I encourage people learn about what your parents went through, learn about what, your friends' parents went through and why, and maybe it helps you kind of piece together the picture of like, well, why are they the way they are, right? And when you start to understand that, you go, okay, I get it, right? A light bulb clicks on and it's like, okay, I get it now. And I understand why my parent, understanding why your parent chose to homeschool you, understanding why your parent wanted you to grow up in church, understanding why your parent wanted to do XYZ. It's like,
Sure.
I get it now. I understand it. I can accept it. And then it's a healing journey for all of us. So,
Yeah. It's cathartic. I mean, even like listening to your other podcasts, parents, of course, I'm gonna understand more, but the other students that you've interviewed, it's cathartic for sure.
Well, thank you. That's the hope.
Yeah.
The show started in a very like, oh, I just want to like, fluffy catch up with people, and then it's become a lot deeper than that. So, which has been good. I'm hoping people find healing or something out of this.
Yeah,
But
100%.
so it sounds like around your fourth year of homeschooling was really where you kind of found. It sounds like your groove and like, okay, I kind of got this now. But was there ever was there ever a point where you actually were like, okay, I think I got this. Like I think I know what I'm doing. I feel even though things were changing, like you said, curriculums were changing and whatever, but was there ever a point where you were like, okay, I think I'm good?
I would say no.
Okay.
I never felt super confident. I mean, I would I would be so puzzled by families that would pick one thing, like one curriculum type, and stick with it all the way through. I had a cousin who did that. There were several homeschool moms that were like, "Oh yeah, we've stayed with such and such a curriculum. We get the box of books every year and all the things." And I was like, I can't imagine that. I just can't imagine not changing it up a lot because as my kids' needs change, to change it up, or we didn't like that particular thing, so let's try something else. And maybe that's a little bit about my personality. I don't know. I think I like to be able to count on something. I love a certain amount of structure, but other structure I hate. I just chafe under it. So my youngest has told me recently that she thinks I have ADHD. So I would have never thought that, but I wasn't the best student. I did like hands-on learning, and so I did kind of do that more with my kids. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I never felt confident. We changed it
Okay.
up all.
I mean, hey, I don't think my mom felt confident at any point, even though I would say, "Oh, we found our groove around this point," but I don't. Yeah, I think I think there's that constant fear, especially as a parent, that it's like, what if I'm really screwing this up? Like, what if there's just,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I'm setting them up for failure, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do.
Right.
When it comes to, you brought up like the kind of like hands-on learning thing. What is there anything that sticks out in your brain where you're like, okay, I know this was, I mean, you also were a homeschool kid, so maybe it
Mhm.
wasn't so like out of the box thinking, but like, is there anything that comes to your brain when you go, okay, like we did this and this was very like non-traditional school style anything?
Oh, I would say reading out loud to my kids, all of them together.
Okay.
And so that also plays into that kind of curriculum that we used a few things that were it was very literature based. And
Hmm.
so you would literally sit on the couch and all the kids would come and listen to a book on science, and it would be somebody's story and how this scientist discovered, something, and we would read it together. So my younger kids, they might not even be in grade school yet, but they would sit and listen. And so yeah, I would say that's not super traditional, but it is a homeschool thing. My
Yeah.
mom did. And so you're absorbing a lot, and the little kids maybe learn at a higher level and they just get part of it. They might not get all of it. But my two younger ones, I felt like they absorbed a ton. But it would be interesting now to quiz them on like, what do you remember from this? Because it might be totally different than what I thought they were getting.
So you said you would read books that were maybe fiction or like a biography, more of a story about somebody like in the science
Yes.
realm, right?
Yeah,
Like Madame Curie or something like that, right? Where it
sure.
was more of a story that would lead into, okay, now we understand
Yes.
this aspect of whatever.
Yeah. But some of the books were it was part of the science curriculum that we
Hmm.
were
Okay.
using. And so it would talk about like so and so did this scientific experiment and then
Right.
this is what happened. So but it wove the story, their life story into it. So in my opinion, it was more interesting
Oh
than
yeah,
just this is the scientific experiment that came out of it.
absolutely. I mean, I like that I think it's so much better to learn through sometimes the lens of like trying to see the world through the person,
Mm,
as opposed to reading a textbook can just be very
dry.
boring, daunting, dry. Um, yeah, when my family, we did a similar thing. We would read all together and read. Like I remember reading, we were learning about Lewis and Clark, and we read a whole book that was kind of through
Yep.
the lens of Sacagawea and
Mhm.
kind of experiencing that whole thing. And yeah, maybe the book wasn't 100% accurate, but it was pretty close, and then we could kind of weave out, and carve out some of the stuff that maybe wasn't as accurate. And it just tied in with the textbook a lot nicer sometimes to be like, okay, I I can picture this now.
Yep.
And I think that's sometimes the hardest thing about learning is we have a learning system in our country right now that's very like regurgitative, right? Where it's just like you learn it, you just vomit it back out, and then you don't really ever have to deal with it again.
Right.
But when you can tie things into something that people actually like care about, well, all of a sudden it's like that's going to stick a lot more with people than
Yep.
just kind of this like regurgitative mess, right?
For sure. Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's interesting because while that's important, when I got to college, I realized that I had to learn how to just like regurgitate information very quickly because it was
Yep.
vastly different because I was like, I can't give a crap about any of this stuff anymore because everything was so much faster. Where I was like, I just have to be able to like memorize it for 24 hours, put it down on paper, get an A on the test, and move on. Like,
Yeah. And
and
part of life is like that. Like
yeah,
eventually they were taking classes at Ventura College. And so you just had to eke it out, and you did get timed on stuff. And
yeah.
I very much stayed away from that because I thought it produced so much anxiety, like the time test. But eventually they did have to do some of that.
I did want to ask you about that too because your kids were some of I know it wasn't uncommon for the homeschool kids to go take classes at VC, but within I don't even say within the homeschool group it was or in the Ojai Valley it was uncommon, but I didn't do that. But at what point did you kind of make that decision of like, okay, hey, they're gonna go take this class at VC, or like what led to that?
I think necessity, because I couldn't teach them the like upper level anything.
Okay,
And then it was the dual enroll thing, and that they could go to VC for free
okay,
and then get those high school credits. So with dairy, we started later because I was still homeschooling all the younger ones, and it just wasn't practical to drive him there. But so I think he was about 16 or something when he started taking classes. And so like he could get I think he took an English class. I don't remember all the things he took, but with my youngest, I mean, Mia was taking Callie I think Callie had already graduated and was taking her GEs. So she was taking a math class, and Mia took it with her. So Mia was way younger. I think she was ninth grade.
okay,
And it was so amazing because they had a great teacher. And I think they both, I mean, they could correct me here, but I think they both went from feeling not super smart in math to feeling like, oh, I love math because this
yeah,
teacher was so amazing. And so they took one summer, it was like an accelerated class with two classes in one over the summer. So it was mostly because I didn't feel at all qualified to teach those things, and why not get it free than going to like a private tutor and paying so much money, you know?
I mean, Group Solutions and Achieve had kind of built some of that like classroom setting for a lot of us, but going, I mean, my first time ever entering a college class, I was overwhelmed. I was like, there's so many people in here. And like, but I very quickly picked up the like, okay, this is how this functions. But to have done that in ninth grade, I think it would have set me up even more for success, I guess. Um, so that's good. I don't know. I don't know. I was just always interested why people chose to do that over, because some people just stayed at home like I did. I was at home the whole time.
Yeah, but your mom also had a college degree.
This is true.
And so, yeah, and I think I always felt a little bit of that like imposter syndrome, maybe like, what am I doing? I, I, I'm very much a self-taught person, and I think that's a the beauty of homeschooling. Like, you have to learn on your own, because I mean, in our family, my mom had all these other kids, so we had to be self-taught to a certain extent. And that helps you in life quite a bit if you're a
Right.
self-starter and you go pursue things you're interested in. Um, yeah. So I feel like I had a little bit of that where I just didn't feel confident. Like, I don't remember that math. I was okay at algebra, but it had been so many years that I was like, let them do it. And then they get the dual enroll thing. And that was part of maybe where my kids felt pressured, like, go get started in college. You can get these credits for free, and then you're already on your way to a degree. So that could have been where some of the pressure was. I mean, I think Mia feels like, I just think it was good that she was with Callie, because I think it would have been super overwhelming to throw her into a math class by herself at 14.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
Callie was a big buffer there because she'd been taking classes.
For as much as we had the homeschool group and we had friends and like we were not the unsocialized homeschoolers that most people hear about, there is still that like there's a real anxiety around sometimes like entering into a classroom for the first time or being put in a situation where you're like, okay, I have to kind of like be normal, quote unquote. I mean, also ninth grade going to a college level class, probably a little bit overwhelming. Community college is nice though, in that you get such a wide range of like anybody and everybody is there. There's high school kids to there's full fledged adults in their 40s and 50s who are,
Right.
finally fulfilling their dream of getting a degree. So it's like, get a little bit more of a gamut there. But yeah, but I don't know. That's interesting. And Callie and Mia, you guys are welcome to come on the show. I'm gonna throw that out here now. If you felt like listening to your mom's interview, but please come on the show because um, you can set your mom's story straight.
That's right. I might not listen to it, but no, I would
Yeah,
have to. I'm too curious.
that's been one of the cool things about doing this show is getting to now not only talk to the kids who grew up with this, but also now the parents and getting to hear their side of things because I could sit here and complain all day about my mom didn't do this or my mom did this poorly or whatever, right? But being able to hear a parent's perspective on, well, I chose to do this because of X. I pushed my kid to do this because of Y. I think that's important. And so thank you, first of all, for coming on because
Oh, for sure.
it's not easy to get on camera and be willing to put yourself out there. Um, with that, is there a piece of advice you would give a parent who is maybe early in their homeschool career or thinking about homeschooling their kid that you're like, if I had just known maybe this one thing, it would have changed things, or maybe it was a piece of advice you had been given that you were just like, okay, this made things a lot easier.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the healthier you are emotionally as a parent, the better you're going to do with your kids. And I mean, that's so loaded. It's so hard when you're raising little kids to like make time for therapy or make time to process like hard stuff in your life. But I honestly feel like if we're not if we don't know how to attune to them, we're not going to do a good job. And so I kind of, I did try to be in therapy back then, but it was just a hard time to do it. Both
Yeah.
like takes time, it takes money, it's expensive. You don't even, I mean, for me, I didn't even know myself then. I feel like I've gotten to know myself much better after like 40. Um, but I would just say follow your gut. Follow your gut. Don't read all the books that say you have to do this or that unless it like lines up with how you already feel in your gut, because I just feel like when I gave into peer pressure from other homeschool parents, because there's a ton of it, um I made poorer decisions. And when I like really kind of focused on what felt right, it went better.
Mhm.
And what felt right to me was like being with my kids, like sitting on the couch and reading and spending the time. And um I know that's super like hoity toity, but I just feel like the more, I would just say, pay attention to your kids, pay attention to their emotions and let them have big emotions. I feel like I did not do a good job of that. I was always trying like, it's okay, rather than just like, you're upset. It's okay to be upset. You have these big feelings. It's okay. So I would say, don't be, I I don't know. It's going to so differ with each person, but if I could go back and be like, forget the curriculum today. My kid just needs to vibe with me right now. And, so hippie it out, dude. That would be my advice. Uh,
I love that advice. That's great. I think
oh,
you said some really powerful things there of just like being in, I think the reason a lot of people want to homeschool their kids, well, I think now there's really two reasons, but one of the main ones that I hear from people is they're like, I just want to have a good relationship with my kids. And whether that, I think just being able to spend time with your kids is important and it's valuable. And I think a lot of kids will look back on that and go, okay, mom and dad cared about me and they cared about, my emotions and my feelings and it's never too late. That's the other thing. It's never too late. I mean, my dad and I can still hang out to this day. And it's not always been that way. Um, so no, that's super powerful. The other thing I wanted to ask you was about kind of the transition out of being a homeschool parent and now all of your kids are graduated, they're full-fledged adults, like to go from okay, I'm mom, I'm teacher, I'm a wife, I'm all of these things to okay, like teaching is done now. Like what how was that transition for you? Like was there a mourning period? Was there like I'm unsure what to do now? Like I don't know, was it a difficult transition or do you feel like you had kind of like I don't know, accepted it building up as time went on?
well, I think it was pretty gradual. When Mia, so I just had Mia left, and she was taking all of her classes at Ventura College. She was probably 16 at the time. And I started volunteering at the church where I work now. And so I would drop her off at Ventura College and I'd go volunteer in the office doing administrative stuff and then pick her up and we'd go home. And so I was volunteering probably 3 hours at a time, a couple days a week. And then that turned into a job. I was offered like a 20-hour a week job. And so it kind of gave me enough to do that I wasn't as aware of the season was ending. But then when it did end, I think like there's definitely been this grieving of like, I'm done. My kids are raised. And then you start, for me, like I think of all the things I wish I'd done differently. And which is a spiral there. Um, and so anyway, it was gradual because I was volunteering and then it turned into a job and so it was great. And then
Right.
they didn't need me at home and so I was at work half the time and then it turned into a full-time job. But it was I kind of felt like God was nice to me and being like, here's something for you to do so you're not going to be a weepy like mom sitting at home in a puddle.
No, I really just like I said, I wanted to ask because I think that's I watched my mom struggle with the transition out. And if you want to hear more about it, go listen to the episode I did with my mom because it's I it was interesting. I didn't think about I hadn't thought about I went through transitions, right? I had moved to college and I was doing all these things, but yeah, her job essentially was going away. So it's nice that you kind of like were like, well, we kind of just transitioned. It just kind of this slowly panned out and this new thing kind of came in and it gave me some purpose and that's important, I think, because so many I've said this on the show before. I think a lot of homeschool parents did this. The end goal was like get the kid to the end of high school and like then my job is done. But nobody was prepping for what was coming after. So both the kids sometimes struggled because they were like, I don't know where to go after this. And then I think the parents sometimes struggled because they were like, well, now I don't know where to go after this. Because that was it. That was the end goal. Um, And maybe it's easier for dads because dads tend to have a job that they're still working. Um,
Yeah.
but for moms, I think finding that thing that you have a passion for and being able to transition that and still have kind of this like purpose and meaning
Yeah.
is important. So
That's not to say it's not bumpy. Like
yeah.
for sure bumpy, like navigating an adult relationship with your kid and being knowing how to do it because we did it. And honestly, I think it's easier in a way if your kid goes away. And then like Derry, he was gone at 20 and he got to work through a lot of his angst on his own.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's a lot easier than your kid is in your house working through their angst with you.
Yeah.
And then you're butting heads a lot or whatever, you know. So
Yeah.
and it's also nice that it happens one at a time. Like they turn 18 one at a time.
Yeah.
And you know, so you grieve at different times and it's, you know, so but I love each of my kids and I think they're amazing humans and I just, you know, there's so much I wish I could go back and change with the knowledge and the tools I have now. Not that I'm killing it now. They will tell you I'm not. but but I feel like I'm becoming, you know, a healthier person little by little and so anyway, hopefully our adult relationships can continue to grow and be good, you know?
It's so crazy to me that when I started the show, I didn't expect parents to resonate with it as much. I was like, this is really for the kids. It's really for the 20-year-olds and and some of the early 30-year-olds. But I was like, that's who it's for. And then I immediately started getting messages from parents, yourself included, who were just like, I'm also changing. I'm learning. I'm like growing. And it's like, oh, okay. And it took me a minute because I was like, I'd already seen that in my parents, but I didn't really. I don't know. You sometimes think about other people's parents as just like that's just who they are. That's just
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
they're Ruth Brooks will always be Ruth Brooks in my eyes, and not that you changed like drastically in like personality or anything like that, but it's so interesting to now hear from parents that it's like they are also evolving. They're also changing. They're in later stages of their life than I am, and they can still help me. They can still be there for me in different ways. Um, so thank you again for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us today. I really appreciate
Sure.
it.
You too. You too. You set the stage, Jacob, just
Well, thank you.
with the way you've been super vulnerable. It's an amazing thing. So I appreciate all you've shared.
Thank you so much. I will ask you this. Are there any homeschool stories that we did not touch on that you're like, oh my gosh, this is whether it's a cringy moment or just a like super happy moment or anything like that? We're not going to talk about my red pants because that's that's been beat to death on this. But here's your opportunity to embarrass your kids if you want to. Um, but I will say this while you think about that. The Brooks house for me was always a very safe place. I played airsoft there a lot. Community group with everybody there at their house. It was wonderful. It was wonderful experiences always. And I don't really have any negatives about it. And I'm sure the house was not always rainbows and unicorns, but but I say that to say that one of the great things about being in a homeschool community was families like the Brooks family, like other families and kids who have been on the show. They had safe places for us to hang out and to grow as people, and it was amazing. So thank you also for that.
Oh, for sure. I'm glad you felt that way. I mean, that's always what I was going for. But uh, so I would say like one of the best feelings for me was like all you boys out there playing airsoft. And then I remember this one time, I think the guys were playing airsoft and Callie had a couple little girlfriends over and they were kayaking in the creek. Do you remember that?
I want to say I remember that. I remember kayaking in your creek, and I remember the girls would hang out sometimes. Yeah.
I just don't know like if those happened at the same time, but for me as a mom, it was like no better feeling than to have all my kids around having fun and then their friends here, at the house
Mhm.
too. It was just such a like fulfilled feeling. I loved it. But thinking back, I was like, did they kayak while the boys were playing airsoft? Because that's a little bit dangerous. But I think it did happen once.
It's very possible, yeah. And to set the scene too, the Brooks house is built almost on top of a river. So there's a river and brush, and I know it looks very different now, but it was like a jungle in their backyard. So when we talk about playing in the backyard, it was like, I mean, we would joke it was like Vietnam, like we crawling through
Right.
bushes and all kinds of stuff. But it was like some of the most fun was had in your backyard. I know for myself and for a bunch of homeschool kids. So
Yeah, there would be kids that showed up that I had no idea who they were, but they would heard about it. I was like, oh, that kid must be from like City Valley or something. Like I'd only see
yeah,
them once a year at the airsoft battle.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Ruth, thank you once again. Before I close, any last words? Anything else? I mean, you've shared so much already, but um,
Well,
this has been
yes,
amazing.
I would like to say that if my other kids come on, they can say whatever they want about me, and I will just suck it up and be like, yes, this is your truth. I didn't mean to screw you up, but this is your truth. No, but seriously, I would hope that they could come on and know that I will be fine with whatever they say, because I did not have it together. And anyway, you
Yeah.
should hear Mia mimic me.
Okay, Mia, you got to come on the show. We're gonna put you to the test. Um, yeah, this and that goes for any homeschoolers out there. If you guys want to be on the show, if you want your parent to be on the show, like reach out to me. I mean, I don't bite, I promise. There's two really great ways to do that. You can either DM me on Instagram, that's at EXHSClub, or you can email me at exhsclub@gmail.com and just say, hey, what's up? I want to come on the show. Or if you don't want to come on the show, but you still want to share a story, I would love to hear that as well. Aside from that, there's a survey down below. I forgot to mention at the top of the show. Survey at the top of the show. It's a link. It's got a couple questions just about things we can do on the show better for you, where we can build a community, all those great things. This has been the Ex-Homeschoolers Club, and yeah, until next time, I'll see ya. All right, peace.